Well,
No, you can turn your video feed off in the bottom left-hand corner if you want.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to start the meeting. Good evening and welcome to the September 9th meeting of the City of Kalamazoo Zoning Board of Appeals, a volunteer board appointed by the City Commission. Tonight's meeting is being held electronically and being streamed live on the city's Facebook page and YouTube channel. Mr. Eldridge, will you please conduct a roll call for attendance?
I sure will. And would each member please respond with the city and state in which you're in? We'll start with Ms. Doan.
Present, Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Mr. Flaw.
Present, Portage, Michigan.
Ms. Vanden Hamburg.
I think you're muted, Beth.
Present, Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Thank you. Ms. Harrington.
Sorry, Harrington, Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Thank
Present.
you. Mr. Turpinning.
Present, Kalamazoo, Michigan, the great neighborhood of the Vine.
And Chair Lager.
Present, Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does staff have any announcements or changes to the original agenda?
No announcements or changes this evening.
We'll move on to accept last month's minutes. Are there any changes to the August 12th, 2021 minutes? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second,
Second.
any discussion? Will all in favor of approval of the minutes signify by saying aye?
Aye.
Aye.
And opposed, same sign. Motion carries. I will now explain our procedure for tonight's public hearing. For each request, the secretary will read the application into the record. The applicant or representative will have 10 minutes to provide their comments. Following that, public comments received via phone will be aired for the panelist and audience. If the viewing or listening audience would like to make a comment on any of the public hearings, you can do so by calling 269-226-6573. That number is on the white square on the screen. Again, it's 269-226-6573. And you'll be prompted to leave a recording. Comments received by the public hearing for a specific request will be played before the conclusion of that public hearing. After all public comments are listened to, we will close the public hearing on the request. Once the public hearing is closed, the board will then conduct what is called a finding of fact, where the board states what they feel are the facts of the request. The board must approve the finding of fact. Therefore, the first vote you hear is not a ruling on the request, but on the finding of fact. Then the board discusses the request in order to determine a ruling. The board reserves the privilege to ask questions of persons who have already spoken, even though the public comment portion is closed. Once discussion is ended, the board will move on to a roll call vote. A full board consists of 6 members, with 4 votes required to grant a variance or any other type of request. Let's move on to the first agenda item. Ms. Doan will now read the first application into the record.
An application for variance for provisions of the zoning ordinance has been filed with the Zoning Board of Appeals by Mole's Properties LLC Kalamazoo Animal Hospital for 3301 South Burdick Street, which is situated in the Manufacturing Limited District, M1. The applicant is requesting a dimensional variance from Chapter 50-7.2A to authorize a variance of 15 off-street parking spaces to allow for 30 off-street parking spaces, where 15 is the maximum number of off-street parking spaces permitted for the 3,986 square foot Kalamazoo Animal Hospital. Please note this request will not change the zoning classification of the property. This is a request for use variances only regarding the item described above.
Thank you. Applicant, this is your opportunity to present your case.
I will start, Ron.
Okay, go ahead.
So we presented this. Currently, there are 13 parking spaces on site for this 3,800 square foot building, or 3,986 square foot building, which allows us to have 13 total spaces. With our 110% allowance over that, we're allowed to have 15 spaces. In my letter that and I believe you guys have this, we had stated that right now there are 11 to 12 employees on site. They're looking to add 4 to 6 employees, which brings the number to about 17 employees. There's 4 exam rooms in the hospital right now. If one pet is in each exam room and there's one waiting, that brings the number to roughly 25 to 26 spaces of people that would be being served or working there. And that doesn't include animals that are being dropped off, picked up for surgery and other medical procedures. Currently, 6 spaces are leased from Boonzier's Bakery as part of this site. So that's why if you drive by there on some days, there's not, the site isn't completely full because some of the employees are parking off site right now. So what we're requesting is a variance to add additional parking spaces to the site above the 15 that are allowed.
Excellent, thank you.
And Dr. Moyles, if you have anything to add to that, that would be good too.
Sure. I've owned the business there since 1989, and we've had steady growth during all those years. However, the last 2 years have been a tremendous amount of growth, and it's due to the pandemic. Most of the animal hospitals in Kalamazoo went to curbside for a lot of the summer, so they didn't allow anybody in the hospital. And we did that from March until beginning of July. And now we've transitioned over to people being able to come into the hospital. Throughout the Kalamazoo area during the pandemic, almost every hospital except mine refused to take new clients. Curbside takes longer for each appointment. So a lot of hospitals decided not to see new clients, just service their present clients. I always felt an obligation to service the community. So we've always opened up spaces for new clients. That's resulted in about 42% growth so far this year. And I need to add 2 doctors. If I add 2 doctors, I have to add probably 6 support staff to help them. So we're desperately need parking for the employees so that we can open up the parking in front of the building for our clients.
And I think I could tell from the drawings you submitted, but the parking lot the new parking lot you're requesting would be placed behind the building?
Right.
That's correct, yes.
And then someone would just drive alongside the building, either on the right or the left, and it's accessed that way.
Yeah, most of the parking in the back would be reserved for employees, leaving the front for patients and animals and their owners.
And from what I could tell from driving by, it looks like it's just sort of a wooded area back there now.
Yeah, it's wooded. It's a little bit wet for the because there are some wetlands at the back of the site, but this area isn't in the wetlands, so there would be some digging out that would have to occur to build the parking lot up. But yes, it is wooded back there right now. So we're talking about 60 foot behind the building for the new parking lot.
And it doesn't seem to me like it would be visible from the street when you're driving by at all.
It shouldn't be. From the south, the billboards probably block most of it. And then from the north, the buildings, the building on the corner, and then the buildings along Cork Street should block most of that.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
And I will state that we haven't submitted this for site plan because we want to get through this process first to see if this is going to happen. We didn't want to waste a lot of time and effort on going through the site plan process if we couldn't get the variance first. So
there is access to the parking lot via a drive on the right side of the building as you're looking at the building. So that would go back to the employees' parking lot.
Gotcha. Are there any other questions from the board? No, not hearing any.
I have a question.
Oh, Remy, you're on mute.
Forgive me. I'm sorry. I have a question. Mr. Lokes, am I saying your name correctly?
Yeah, that's fine.
Lokes. Okay. Sorry. What's your role at the animal hospital?
I'm the engineer that prepared the drawing.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I got a quick question. So prior to the 43% increase in clientele, did the parking situation work?
I'll defer to Dr. Moyles on that.
Well,
one.
it was always tight. And we ended up a lot of times not only parking in the spaces in front of the building, but parking along the side of the asphalt closer to the street, which is not ideal, but sometimes we could squeeze a few employees in that way. It's always been a little tight, but the last couple of years it's been really difficult. And as such, we turn a lot of patients away that really need care that we just can't get in. We were booked out about 7 weeks for a while, which is really unusual. We added another doctor and we're down to booking out about 2 weeks. But if somebody needs to come in with a problem like today, we can't get them in. Or if there's a new client in town that can't find a veterinarian to see them, I'd like to be able to service those people. So there's been, this whole pandemic thing is just changed everything in our business. Every veterinarian I know is just booked up. So
Are you anticipating a decrease in clientele moving forward?
I'm sorry, what?
Are you anticipating a decrease in clientele moving forward?
No, I expect it to increase. We want to add 2 more doctors, and that'll probably take us up another. Right now we're hovering around 40% increase this year. If we added 2 more doctors, we probably double that.
Gotcha.
Which is tremendous for the business, tremendous for the community if we can do it.
So then how many spaces would you need to operate successfully given your expected growth?
Nick, how many are we adding?
Well, I understand how many you're adding. I want to add, basically what I'm asking is, are we going to anticipate you coming back in another 1.5 or 2 years asking for more parking spaces?
No, this will serve us for a long time. I don't think in my lifetime we'll ever have to have, and we don't have any place to have more parking anyway, so we wouldn't come in with another request.
Gotcha. Okay, and then so currently, what are your options for parking currently, other than using the spaces that you have? You said you are using other.
Yeah, we lease space, 6 spaces from Bonzer's Bakery.
Okay.
For our employees to park over there, but that's a hardship in the winter to walk across. The parking spaces they gave us is at the far end of their parking lot. So it creates problems for the employees having to trudge through the snow in the winter. And I have mostly female employees that don't like going out there in the dark and walking across that parking lot. So we adapted a little bit just by leasing some spaces, but that's not ideal.
Yeah, so you don't think it's a long-term solution?
Oh, I do think it's a long-term solution. I don't think that I'll be coming back for another request.
No, negative. The leasing the spaces is a temporary solution.
Right, temporary, and that could change at any time. I mean, it's just a gentleman's agreement. We pay him so much per spot per month. I think it's like $20 per parking spot per month.
Thank you. That's all my questions.
Okay.
Thanks. Pete, would you like to do staff comments now or after the public hearing portion?
I'll be glad to do the staff comments now. Many of the things have already been covered, specifically the 6 leased parking spaces that are on the Bonzer Bakery property. that with the addition of the employees, if that goes as planned, will definitely generate a need for, at least another 12 parking spaces. So so if that is, if that trajectory holds true, then I can see the significant increase in the parking demand. One thing I noted out of our ordinance is we have a category for office space as far as calculated off-street parking. We don't have a separate category for a medical clinic, for example, or a veterinarian hospital. So it is just, one parking space for every 300 square feet of gross floor area. So it's a very all-encompassing standard that's being applied. I can, it sounds like, from what I understand of these operations, they are more people intensive between the receptionists, the doctors themselves, and then of course the lab technicians. So it is a little bit different, and I know this board has dealt with a variety of different types of uses in the past. I do recall there was a parking variance granted for a marijuana retailer on Drake Road. And that was another situation where, due to the number of employees that was abnormally high compared to a typical retailer, that was part of the hardship that they were citing. And this situation is similar to that, in that it's the sheer number of employees that is actually, if they do add 4 to 6 employees, the number of employees will be actually over the maximum allowed number of off-street parking spaces, leaving no parking spaces left for customers. So that's not a practical layout in the long run to make this business successful in our community. So, I just wanted to point out those things. For those that are aware of our natural features protection ordinance, I just want to make the comment that, that we have noted that is that this property is in the natural features protection overlay. And I believe the engineer, Nick, is well aware of that too. And that's something that would be looked at during site plan review. So those are my comments for this evening, and I'm open to any questions from the board.
Thank you, Pete.
Thanks, Pete. I have a question about the natural features protection. What do you anticipate there? So the property that they're requesting to bulldoze for a parking lot is in the natural features protection. Was this premature to come to the zoning board of appeals prior to getting the site plan approved, with that specific issue not being taken care of first?
Well, good question. And for clarification, any property where a portion of that property is touches on any of the protected features. We're talking bodies of water, creeks, rivers, woodlands, steep sloped areas. So if any portion of the property falls within that natural features protection requirement, then the property itself is then included in the overlay. So the whole property is identified as being in it. It doesn't mean the whole property has natural features per se that need to be protected. So that's part of the site plan review. We'll look at, what is the extent of the wetlands on the east end of the property, and does this proposed development impact that? I think Nick was kind of alluding to the fact that that's a known quantity, and that's part of the reason why it's a fairly small footprint parking lot with angled parking and one-way traffic circulation behind the building, so that it doesn't extend that far out from the building. But that's a good question, and the answer is because it's because we don't know exactly where those protected areas are at this point. It's safe to send it to the zoning board of appeals first and then have that detailed analysis done at the site plan level.
Okay, thank you for that. And follow up to that is, dang, the sun's like in my face. Sorry. The follow up to that is, goodness. I want to know if their building and their business needs would take priority, because if their business is already located in the natural features protection overlay, then their business needs would take priority over nature's needs. And how do you prioritize that then? And is that not something that we need to be concerned with? Like when their designer, when Nick engineers this entire situation, will it like be compensated for? Is that what we should be hoping for? Is that Nick will compensate for where those areas need to be, since the entire business is in the overlay? Then since the entire business is in the natural features protection situation, then he will make accommodations for that to be compensated for in his design. Is that how I should be perceiving that?
No, it may be I misspoke, but the whole property is identified in the overlay. So it's
Right.
identified as being an NFP property. But as far as the features, those natural features that have placed it in the overlay, that could be just, the furthest east edge of the property. It could be, it could be the east 25% of the parcel is really, designated as a wetland. But that's what would be looked at, by the engineering firm. And so as far as the building that's already there, we can't really do anything where, buildings and parking lots have already been constructed. The goal of this ordinance is to protect, what nature
The existing
and
natural,
features
yes,
we
yes,
still
sir.
have. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
And I just want to reiterate, so if, just so I'm clear, we're giving a variance, it still has to go through site plan, it still has to go through the natural features board, it still has to go, there's multiple areas in there that are going to make sure that the environment is protected and it's
Correct.
conforming.
Well,
Okay.
My property is very deep. It goes all the way back to, I think it's Portage Creek. And a portion of that is wetland, but the part that we're building on, as far as Nick showed me on a city map, is not wetland. And we're just taking out some trees. I mean, it's a huge parcel back there. It's beautiful nature area, but we're only taking out, I don't know how many foot.
Yeah, that doesn't, what you're doing, that's not our concern right now. We're just looking at that. So appreciate it. But that will all get handled in the site plan. It'll all get handled by the natural features. So thank you for sharing.
Okay.
All right. Well, let's now open up to public hearing. Have there been any public comments received?
Yes, there is one public comment, and one moment while I get that queued up for you.
Yes, I'm calling regarding item D1. This is John Hilliard, President of Millwood Neighborhood Watch Association. I'm calling in support of this variance. This is a vibrant business in our neighborhood, and they do need the extra space, so we support it. Thank you.
Okay, that's the end of public comments.
All right, thank you. I'd now move on to a motion for finding of fact. Ms. Harrington?
Okay, here we go. All right, so I move that the finding of fact for 3301 South Burdick shall include all information included in the notice of public hearing dated August 25th, 2021. 18 notices of public hearing were sent and 0 responses were received. A public hearing was held before the board and public comments were accepted. We did not receive any responses in documentation form, but we did receive a phone call from, sorry, I wrote his name down, John Hilliard, who's the president of the Millwood Neighborhood Watch. And he was in support of this variance. He said that the business was a vibrant business and he was in support and that they needed the extra parking. The finding of fact shall include that statement from Mr. Hilliard and also the other comments that were made, which are summarized as follows. So Dr. Moyles requested 15 additional parking spaces for his animal hospital, again, located at 3301 South Burdick Street. He has had a 43% increase in his business since the COVID-19 pandemic has started. He is hoping to hire 2 new doctors and at least 4 new staff people, and has indicated that we need more parking because he's also doing curbside service to his clients. And he has seen a significant increase in his business. He would like to clear out the back area of his business to create additional parking for his staff and to create a system, an engineer system Mr. Nick Lokes has designed to create a better system for Dr. Moyles to do his business. Mr. Flaw, board member Flaw, asked questions about the potential of an additional request happening in the future based on his extraordinary increase in business. And he has said that he will not, it was 6 support staff that he was hoping to hire. As I misspoke earlier. And he said he would not need to come back to the board to make an additional request. A staff comment indicated that there was also a hardship because there were 6 spaces that were leased from Bunzar Bakery. And it is far away from the business in the winter. It creates a hardship for the current employees. And it's there's a $20 per parking space fee. And so this would create an easier transition for staff to be able to come into their place of business, specifically female staff members that have to walk across a dark parking lot at night by themselves. And they have not submitted a site plan yet. They have not submitted a site plan yet, and the natural features protection is also a concern in this, that they will have to contend with the site plan and this natural features protection overlay for this particular parcel because it is in it's in the natural features protection zone. And that's the finding of fact. Is there anything else that I need to say, Pete?
Very good. Nope. Okay. I think, is there a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor of approval of the motion of finding fact signify by saying aye.
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 And opposed, same sign. The motion carries. Now we'll move on to discussion. Oh, first, let's start with a motion. May I have a motion for the approval of the variance?
I make a motion for the approval of the variance.
Could you read it in so we're real specific on what we're moving?
Thank you, Chair Lager. I make a motion for the approval of the variance for Moyles Properties, Kalamazoo Animal Hospital at 3301 South Burdick Street. The applicant is requesting a dimensional variance from chapter 50.7.2 to authorize a variance of 15 off-street parking spaces to allow for 30 off-street parking spaces, where 15 is the maximum number of off-street parking spaces.
Very good. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Discussion.
I'm going to be in support of the variance based on some of the comments that staff made about them, about the new ordinance, or the ordinance not really taking into clinical use, and they just kind of married that to office space. So in many ways, the ordinance just isn't fitting the actual use of the building. Also, there may be a bunch of other people with that problem too, because I just Google mapped the whole street view, the whole thing, and it does not look like there's a single business that doesn't have someone parking on the grass or on the sidewalk as I go down there, as I'm traveling down there via the digital world. So they're probably not the only one with this hardship. And so I'm going to be in support. It makes sense. Looks like they're doing the minimum amount that they can to disrupt the area. I'm trusting the natural features board and site plan to do their job to make sure that it's not going to cause any additional harm to the environment. And so because of that, I'll be in support.
Thank you.
I also will be in support of this one. And the only thing I'd add to what Mr. Flaw added was, I think that the granting of this variance seems very unlikely to negatively affect any adjacent landowners. The parking lot is behind there. It sounds like the consideration has been already been made to minimize the amount of parking lot coverage that there would be. So I will be in favor of this too.
Thank you.
I will definitely be in favor of this. I, as a chairperson for the Vine Neighborhood Association, know that your clinic personally has provided to some of our less fortunate residents, and you actually assisted with my neighbor's dog when they are extremely in time of need. So I feel that that is a good showing of stewardship without unexpected reward. And I think that that alone shows that you are in it to commit to the community.
Very good. Could we have a roll call vote, Pete?
Yes, yes. Let's start with Doan,
Yes.
Flaw,
Yes.
Vanden Hamburg,
Yes.
Harrington,
Yes.
Turpinning,
Yes.
Lager.
Yes. The motion carries. The variance is granted.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Have a good night.
Yep. Have a good night.
Okay, thank you. I'll log off.
Ms. Doan, will you now read the second case into the record?
Certainly. One moment, please. An application for a variance for provisions of the zoning ordinance has been filed with the Zoning Board of Appeals by KNHS Home Ownership Services for 738 Harrison Street, which is situated in the residential mixed-use district, sub-area 2 of the Riverfront Overlay. The applicant is requesting the following. 1, a dimensional variance from Appendix A, Chapter 5, 5.1 of 6.5 feet to authorize a 37.5 foot wide lot to be buildable where the required lot width is 44 feet in the RMU district. And 2, a dimensional variance from Appendix A, Chapter 5, 5.1 of 1,169 square feet to authorize a 4,331 square foot lot to be buildable where the required lot area is 5,500 square feet in the RMU district. Please note this request will not change the zoning classification of the property. This is a request for variance, for use variance only regarding the items described above.
Thank you. I'd like to make an announcement at the beginning of this one. So I do have a conflict of interest on this. I am the executive director of the applicant in this case. So I will not be speaking either on behalf of the applicant, KNHS, or any opinions one way or the other about the granting of the variance. I will, however, simply run the meeting during this portion of it. So ask for motions and seconds and that kind of stuff. So with that, allow me to run the meeting and not say anything else. Will the applicant, this is your opportunity to present your case. Mr. Milzarek.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for having me tonight. It's a pleasure to be here. Us at KNHS, we've been engaged in a great partnership with the City of Kalamazoo and LISC and the Western Michigan Home Builders Association for the last several years, doing single-family infill housing in our core neighborhoods. And we have thus far built 8 homes and had those sold to area residents. And we are on our next round, and we have purchased this lot on Harrison Street from the City of Kalamazoo with the intent of building one of these single-family homes on it. As we made our way through that process, we realized that the zoning setback, or the lot width and total size, was not quite large enough for the lot to be buildable. So it's not that the home we are building does not conform with the zoning, it's that the zoning makes the lot unbuildable as it stands without a variance. The home we plan to build here is really about the same size as the homes that are on that block. 7 of the 8 lots to the south of this are the same size and have existing single family structures on them, approximately the same size as the home we are building. Approving this variance will allow this new development and infill to happen there. And that is in line with the city and the North Side neighborhood strategic plans to have infill on vacant lots where there were once homes. And this is really, this infill strategy that we've all been engaged in through this partnership has been vital towards combating the housing shortage in Kalamazoo and combating displacement as we provide additional housing for our area residents looking to become homeowners. So I'll keep the introduction short and allow board members to ask questions of me.
Any questions?
What did you mean by poor neighborhoods? What do you mean?
Core neighborhoods. I'm sorry
Okay.
if that sounded like
Sorry.
poor.
Yeah,
Definitely
thank you
did
for
not say
that.
poor neighborhoods. Sorry.
Thank
Oh,
you.
You're
I
welcome.
didn't understand.
Poor
Thank
with
you.
the C. Absolutely. Mhm.
So you said there were other houses in this neighborhood that are on lots the same size? Do you know roughly the percentage?
So Harrison is an interesting street because it's sort of nestled in there around a lot of new development and industrial. But on that side of the street alone, there are 7 single family structures on the exact same lot size as far as the frontage. Those lots are all the same 37 square foot frontage as opposed to the 44 that the RMU calls for.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, hearing no further discussion, I would ask if open this up. Well, actually, I'm sorry. Let's get staff comments first. Pete.
Okay, thank you. Well, Mr. Milzarek, you made my job easy here. So you already touched on the infill housing piece, and yeah, the city has been very proactive about working with the other nonprofit agencies around the city to address the infill housing. In many of these situations, I don't know all the history of this particular lot, but we've had a lot of homes that have have burned down over the last 10 years or been damaged in some other way, and or just demolition by neglect per se, and had to be torn down. Where we've got a lot of empty teeth on various blocks around the city. So we're really trying to address not only the need for more housing, but make use of these vacant lots if indeed they're large enough to accommodate a house. As Mr. Milzarek alluded to, all the lots, the 7 lots immediately south of this, all have the same lot width. Some of them actually have less lot depth, so they're actually smaller square footage wise, yet they're all occupied with single family homes. So this lot is definitely in character with what's on the rest of that block along Harrison Street. It meets the goals of the city's infill housing initiative, and also touches on our strategic plan and our master plan as far as complete neighborhoods, addressing the addition of housing units. The area is actually, if I look at the future land use map, the area is in the neighborhood edge classification. Obviously, there's a lot of things going on in that area of the north side with apartment buildings and businesses. But that neighborhood edge classification does allow for low and medium residential development, as well as low intensity commercial, which is that commercial element you see with the restaurants around Louis and so forth. So it's so this is just another good addition to the area. And in 2018, we did update the dimensional standards for residential lots as far as the minimum lot width, the minimum lot area. And it's not clear why the residential mixed use zone district was not updated as well, but that's kind of the situation that we're faced with, where in any other residential zone district, this would have been a buildable lot, but in RMU, which requires 44 feet of lot width and 5,500 square feet of lot area, it takes us a very large lot to meet those standards, and this one is clearly shy of that. So the only option was the Zoning Board of Appeals here to address this shortcoming, given the fact that a building permit's already been submitted, and they'd like to move this project forward. So that is all I've got. I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Pete, can you tell me what the municipal definition is of infill housing? Like, what definition are you guys, what is infill housing?
Well, infill housing is is individual construction projects on blocks that have available lots. So it's not, it's just the opposite of building out, a subdivision or, a cul-de-sac of a group of vacant lots. We are looking at our vacant lot inventory. The land bank is doing the same thing and saying, what is the purpose of holding these lots? Are they buildable? Is there an organization like KNHS or other organizations in the community that may be interested in this lot for a construction project? And that's how those partnerships have developed.
Thank you. So is it specific to like vacant buildable lots that are in neighborhoods that these spaces are being identified for the purposes that Mr. Milzarek, is bringing to the forefront here? Is it specific to buildable lots? Because there's like an abundance of non-buildable lots too. So is it
Yes.
specific to, okay, thank you.
And part of that analysis is some of these lots that are too narrow to build upon. You know, they are being split and sold to the neighboring properties to give them more green space. So it's just, you know, it's just trying to, use this inventory of vacant properties in the most productive manner.
I understand. Thank you. It's actually awesome. Thank you.
Any additional questions for Pete or the applicant? Hearing none, are there any public comments?
Yes, there are 2 public comments, and I'll get those queued up for you momentarily.
My name is Pamela Jenkins. I live at 1706 Eggleston Avenue, Kalamazoo, Michigan. I am in support of 738 Harrison's build. Kalamazoo Neighborhood Housing was very instrumental in assisting me purchasing my home, and we need more affordable housing in Kalamazoo.
Good evening. My name is Stephanie Hoffman. I live on the north side of Kalamazoo, and I am calling in support of the variance for the properties at 738 Harrison Street. What I would like to say is that home ownership has been a huge need within our community. We all know that we have a housing crisis here, and what would it look like if we could transition people that are renting current units into home ownership opportunities that will build wealth for their families, specifically families of color, Black and Brown and Indigenous folk. Please support this initiative and this variance request, as it will be something great and beautiful for our community. Thank you.
Okay, that's all the public comments for this public hearing.
Thank you. Could I now have a motion for the finding of fact?
I make a motion for the finding of fact.
Oh, wait, who's doing this one? Is this yours, Beth, or is this yours, Chris? It looks like there was some confusion.
I
Beth,
thought I was doing 3, so I was prepared to do 3. I did take some notes, so would you like me to do the Harrison Street?
I sent the form to Chris.
Hold on.
Beth, I saw you queued up for the 3rd one today. So if Chris is prepared for this one, would you be okay doing the next case? Beth?
3, yeah.
That's okay?
Yeah.
All
I'm
right.
prepared to do
Thanks. Sorry
3.
about that confusion.
Okay.
Perfect. I move that the finding of fact of 738 Harrison Street shall include all information included in the notice of public hearing dated August 25th, 2021. 25 notices of public hearing were sent and 0 responses were received. A public hearing was held before the board and public comments were accepted. In addition to the information and documents contained in the agenda packet, staff provided for this request, the Zoning Board of Appeals received additional documents on the request, including none to follow. The finding of fact shall include those documents just described, and also the facts and comments made during the public hearing are summarized. So note, the chair, Matt Lager, has invested interest in KNHS, the applicant. So we'll only run the meeting and will not make any comments. The applicant, KNHS, represented by Matt Lazarek. KNHS is working on building single family houses on a single family house on Harrison Street. After purchasing the lot, they realized that lot was unbuildable, not only for their house, but for any house given the current zoning code. Most, if not all, of the lots are on the same street, are the same size. Staff noted that the city has partnered with KNHS and is continuing to do so to provide infill housing. Staff also noted that many of the lots on Harrison Street are currently unbuildable and in fact are smaller than the one that is being purchased by the applicant. Staff also noted that this lot would be buildable if it was in any other zone district other than the one that it's currently in. 2 public comments were made. Pam, didn't catch her last name, I think it was Jenkins, is in support, and then Stephanie Hoffman is also in support, and that concludes the finding of fact.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And opposed, same sign. The finding of fact is approved. Will someone now make a motion on the request?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I think in this circumstance, we probably can combine both 1 and 2.
Okay,
Lot width and lot area.
since they're both dimensional, all right.
They're both dimensional variances. We normally would break them up, just in case one of them was approved and one of them was not. But I think in this case, it's the both variances are needed to make it go. So we do not need to break it up into 2 separate votes.
Okay,
Okay. I make a motion to pass a dimensional variance from Appendix A, Chapter 5, 5.1 of 6.5 feet to authorize 37.5 foot wide lot to be buildable where the required lot width is 44 feet in the RMU district. And 2, a dimensional variance from Appendix A, Chapter 5, 5.1 of 1,169 square feet to authorize a 4,331 square foot lot to be buildable where the required area is 5,500 square feet in the RMU district.
is there a second?
Second.
Second, and discussion.
I love this
fully-
project so much. I love it so much.
KNHS has done great work in the Vine neighborhood, and I would highly suggest that they keep on doing what they're doing.
I will be in favor. It's in keeping with the rest of the neighborhood, and anywhere else residential, it would have been allowed. So I don't think it's going to be a problem for the surrounding area. So I'll be in favor.
Any additional discussion? In that case, Pete, can we do a roll call vote?
Wait, I do have one more question. Is there a way that we can pull all those properties together, get an inventory of them, and then do one blanket variance for all of them so that we can do this, or what? Can that happen?
That's a good question. The thing is that there aren't that many lots in that are under this RMU zoning to begin with. And, there is some of them that are of size that they don't need a variance. There's others that already have homes on them. So those would need a variance. I'm not aware of any other areas that are under that RMU zoning that we are looking at infill housing right now. But that's a good question. If we start going into an area that's got a lot of RMU, we would we either A, rezone the area, or B, it would, we would look at whether it made sense. In this case, since it's one lot, it doesn't make sense to pursue a rezoning. But that's a good question.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Clyde Robbins, City Attorney, and it is a good question. However, under Michigan law, you can't grant blanket variances. It has to be a property by property proposition. But what we could do, as mentioned by Mr. Eldridge, is rezone an entire area to put in different standards that would be applicable to those lots.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I will proceed with the vote here. And as Chair Logger indicated, he is abstaining from voting on this matter. We'll start with Mr. Turpinning,
Yes.
Harrington,
Yes, of course.
Vanden Hamburg,
Yes.
Law,
Yes.
and Doan.
Yes.
The motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Matt. And now, Ms. Down, will you read the third case, 3928 Portage Street, into the record?
Yes. An application for a variance for zoning, an application for a variance for provisions of the zoning ordinance has been filed with the Zoning Board of Appeals for Organic Guys LLC for 3928 Portage Street, which is situated in the Commercial Community District. The applicant is requesting a dimensional variance from Chapter 50/4.4E 1B to authorize a variance of 350 feet from the required 500-foot separation distance between marijuana retailer and licensed child care center. There is a Kalamazoo Regional Education Services Agency, KRESA, preschool on Portage Street, which operates during the calendar school year, which is licensed as a child care center. Please note, this request will not change the zoning classification of the property. This is a request for use variances only regarding the item described above.
Thank you. Applicant, this is your opportunity to present your case.
Hello, good evening. My name is Sean Myers. I'm the attorney for Organic Guys. I would first like to thank all of you for your time and your consideration regarding this situation, which came as a surprise to myself and my client. So our property at 3928 Portage Street, my client is actually the tenant at that location. The property owner, Ray Fumia, he originally purchased this property with the intention of adding an adult use retailer into this location. He signed a purchase agreement originally that was set to be contingent upon proper zoning for a marijuana retailer, and he applied for that. And my understanding was that he did receive provisional approval from the zoning department sometime last year. After he received that approval, he thereafter decided to rent the property to my client, Organic Guys. Organic Guys then did their own zoning application and also received a provisional certificate for that zoning. Thereafter, both the property owner and our client have expended great sums of money improving that property to prepare it for as a marijuana retailer. Additionally, the property owner actually closed on the property because it was a contingent purchase agreement based on proper zoning. He actually only closed on it after receiving that zoning. Unfortunately, it turns out that the child care center, which is actually located inside the Millwood United Methodist Church, wasn't identified in that additional review. Or thereafter, when my client, Organic Guys, made a similar application for zoning. A few things about that child care center that are good. I realize that it's a 350-foot variance. This property, the child care center, is located across the street, across Portage, which is a semi-busy street, as you all know. The entrance into that child care center is actually on the opposite side of the building. So there's no view of my client's property from the child care center. Furthermore, their playground is also on the opposite side of the building. So there's a whole structure that blocks any view from our location. Furthermore, 3928 Portage Street is within a strip mall. So there are several other retailers in that location. So it's not like a standalone, hey, it's us building. It's we're looking at using one space in a multi-tenant use building for this location. And without this zoning variance, unfortunately, the building cannot be used for this business purpose. So we definitely would respectfully request that you grant this this variance based on the situation that we've been placed in. I want to point out that we did not create these special circumstances in the first place. The building wouldn't have been purchased in the first place if we would have known that it wasn't proper for this type of use. Additionally, I think that this meets the purpose of your zoning in the first place, where you want to have a varied group of different businesses in the area. And adding this business, I believe, will help to improve the area. Another thing I'd like to point out is that there's been recent studies that cities that allow retail dispensaries have seen increases in property values in the local areas, and Cato research supports those findings. And I would like to point out that this is a very highly regulated business to start with. No one under the age of 21 is allowed to access the property whatsoever. There will be security at the building to prevent anyone from accessing who is a minor. Furthermore, this is a preschool. We're talking very, very young children. And they probably shouldn't be crossing Portage Street anyway. So I would like to introduce Conchetta Mazzetti, who is our project manager, so she can talk to you more specifically about the business and what it's going to be.
Thank you, Sean. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Conchetta. I'm the project manager of this proposed site here at 3928 Portage Street. And I just want to say that I've been working on this project for a long time. And this was a hiccup none of us were expecting. But, you know, here we are. Organic Guys has teamed up with a multi-state operator called STEM Holdings. And we will be using their branding team, their logos, all of that in our store. And we have, because of this and because we are mindful and we are careful around the images that are shown to our children and around the images and the stigma around cannabis, we have chosen to use a logo that has no, even though the word stem comes from the cannabis plant, there are no flowers in our logos, there are no pop leaves, there are no, there's no written word of cannabis. It is simply a very discreet and very sophisticated logo, and our signage will all reflect that. Like Sean said, we are in a building with other businesses that are currently operational, and we've taken into consideration that a lot of where we've strategically placed ourselves in this market is through deliveries. So a lot of our clients will be at home ordering products online and have a delivery within an hour or two to their home. There are a lot of regulations that allow us to do that, but like Sean said, we are the highest regulated industry in our nation at the current moment. And so we anticipate a lot of our traffic will be quick, less than 5 to 10 minutes. They walk in, they get what they need. And a lot of our other customers will be at home ordering products and such. He also touched in a little bit on our security. We have hired WLP security teams as a private contractor. One of them is an ex-law enforcement officer and the other is currently in your force in Kalamazoo. And I met with them and they both seemed really supportive and helpful and gave me some pointers on how we could even modify our own standing operating procedures to be more aware and more conscious of the concerns of the community. And so we've modified that to reflect his suggestions there. I've been spending quite a bit of time in Kalamazoo, and when I look around and I walk your streets, I see families, I see people walking their dogs, I see this really robust kind of connection to community. And because of that, we've decided to do a couple of things, but we are all required by the state to do a reciprocity program where we give back to a charity of our choice. And we have chosen a Blue Star Dog Service, and they offer and match vets with veterans with animals who are service animals. They train them. They have over 25 veterans in Kalamazoo alone that they help place with the right animal to support them. And so we've decided that that's where we'd like to put a little bit of our focus, is on how we can give back to that kind of, that demographic and that part of our community here in Kalamazoo. We understand that the community, the people who live there, the children who live there need to be kept safe. And we can modify as far as we can to stay within the boundaries of the state regulations to ensure that everyone in that community, big, tall, big or small, has, that we have their interests at heart. Because we are a cannabis dispensary, that is true, but we're also all mothers, fathers, and so on.
Could I ask a question about the strip mall there itself? It seems like there's a few different businesses in there. Is the one that's proposed for this site the one that's closest to that church side of the property?
Yes, sir. There is, if you're on Portage Street headed south into Portage, it is the one furthest to the north. That building, it looks like an L a little bit, and it's the littler part of the L. There's a shoe repair, and there's a tanning salon and a hair salon and a cafe.
Okay.
That all share that building.
Any questions from the board?
I have a myriad of different questions, but I'll just ask one. Is there a reason why the 500, if the requirement is 500 feet, why are we imposing upon that why are we imposing that upon this childcare center in the form of a variance if we can't even respect a 500-foot requirement that the ordinance outlines is necessary for an adult use facility? I need to understand that.
Yes, had we been aware that there was a childcare center in that location, our client would not have rented the property, and the property owner actually would not have purchased the property. We had a contingent purchase agreement on proper zoning for a marijuana retailer, and then we were granted provisional approval prior to the purchase agreement turning into a closing. We definitely would have chosen another property. It turns out that it might have been that mistake from the city side that had brought us to this point. And I hate to lay the blame in this situation, but I can assure you that we do respect the community, and we would not have placed ourselves in this situation. We wouldn't have come to in the first place with this if we would have known about that. We only learned about this in the last 30 days, and the application for this business actually was first submitted in June of 2020. So the approval has been in place for more than a year. And unfortunately, it was just brought to ours and the city's attention that this exists. My understanding, however, is that the Millwood Church, correct me if I'm wrong, is not objecting to this variance. I understand that there are other objections, but the church itself is not objecting.
So I understand, and I think it positions this board to, contend with this values assessment as though we're making one against this business, but it just feels very out of touch with, in terms of the due diligence surrounding like the nuance of our community. And that could potentially be, that's what I'm reading in the comments from people that are in opposition to this variance, that this particular, the way that we have, approached this issue has been, there has just not been enough due diligence and taking into consideration what is, again, the nuance of our community. And that alone is a question about, it's an indication of a future, of future care. The best indicator of past performance is future performance. So if that was not done on the front end in this way, to take into consideration that there was going to be an imposition of there's already just a 500-foot variance requirement, or excuse me, space requirement for a child care facility. Like, now we're coming before the Board of Appeals to request, I think it's an imposition. There's the question, but in a statement.
To address that more specifically, in terms of due diligence, I'd just like to point out that the child care center, to my understanding, was not operating last year, and that they're intending on beginning to operate again this fall. So there wasn't a child care center to discover as of last year.
I mean, but we were in a pandemic.
Yes, certainly. I believe that may have even been the cause for why it was not operating.
That is an interesting question, staff. So I guess maybe this is a better comment for Robinson. This may be completely outside of my bounds, but if someone runs through the process of getting approved for having some type of dispensary, and I'm not sure how long that process takes. Do we have any idea? Anyone can answer this. Several months. So 3 months to 10 months? Like, what are we talking?
I think that might be a better question for Mr. Eldridge.
Yeah, I mean, I can answer that. I mean, usually within 4 weeks, 2 to 4 weeks, we've got, an answer to them. It depends on the volume of applications that are under review.
So at what point in time let's just say that let's imagine that for a quick second, I think this is a good point, that this organic guys was able to post up shop. They posted up shop, and then next year, the church across the street decided that they now would like to operate a child facility. Is that outside of is that something that they could not do because of the marijuana dispensary?
Well, those protected uses, which is what the child care center would fall under, they're not limited in where they can locate. So if they chose to locate near a marijuana retailer, they could do so. It doesn't hinder the marijuana retailer if the marijuana retailer is already in place. But so
if the marijuana retailer is already in place, and at what point in time throughout this application process does it actually become established as in place?
Well, when it has an operating license. So
okay.
After site plan review, after building is completed, and they've got their city operating license, their state operating license, then it is an active marijuana retailer.
So as of right now, they do not have, the applicants, correct me if I'm wrong, applicants, you do not have an operating license.
That's correct. And the reason for that is because of how the process works. The first step, the applicant gets pre-qualification from the state. It's like a note that says, yes, you're the type of applicant that's allowed to have one of these licenses. The next step is to go get zoning approval from the municipality. Then get
the zoning approval was approved, correct? Is what
yes,
you're telling
it was twice.
Okay, so the zoning approval was approved.
And then after zoning approval happens, we get the permits to be able to do the build out. Once the build out is complete and the state then inspects it, After everything's complete, the business is completely ready to open and inspected by the state, then the license is issued. So the stage that we came to, we got zoning approval and then zoning approval again with a new applicant. And then permits were issued so that the way the build out could start, and the build out has started. We found out most of the way through the build out that this was then an issue. So without final approval from the city, we can't go forward with getting the actual license. So
there's a Pete, help me out here. So there's multiple zoning things that have to happen. So the last one is after all of the investment from the applicant is done to the building. That's when the final zoning approval happens?
No, it's the building approval. Zoning happens first, building happens later.
Okay.
Is that right? I'm sorry, I didn't.
Let me clarify. So the only thing that Attorney Myers said that was that I'd like to add was that there is a site plan review step before permits are supposed to be issued. And there was some confusion because this isn't a new build. It's not a renovation of an entire building. It's just the use of one of the tenant spaces. So there was some confusion there, and permits were applied for, before that site plan aspect was taken care of. But to going forward, to answer Board Member Flaw's question, so permits are issued. Once the permits are finalized out, then the state comes in and sends their own state inspector in, and they look at the facility, and then they give it the approval to allow for the state operating license. And then the city at that time takes our provisional license and turns that into a local operator license. And then that's the finish line.
And then after that, after all of that's done, that is when it, they, in a sense, have been grandfathered in, and it doesn't matter if anyone builds any child care facilities around the area.
That's
correct. Okay. So any time before that process, if someone wanted to open up a building, open up a child care facility, it would immediately really cut the throat to whoever's investing this money into this building. It would just completely stop it.
I would argue that the time, Mr. Robinson may or may not agree, but I think that the point when you file the initial application is the time frame when that occurs. But
so this might not be actually relevant 100% to granting or not granting of this variance. I think we probably understand the sequencing as well as we're going to understand it on that issue.
Understood. I guess the thing that I'm curious about is if they started the process and there was not a facility there, and then they went through half of the process or 75% of the process, and now there happens to be a facility, I would say that's problematic.
It seems like a hypothetical, though, that's not really at issue right now.
Well, that's what we're dealing with right now.
It is
hypothetical.
But where are y'all from? Where are y'all from, Mr. Myers? Attorney Myers, where are y'all from?
I'm myself. I work for a law firm out of Detroit.
Okay, where is this company? Like, this is a multi-state operation. Where are y'all?
Can you answer this?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, she's gonna answer it.
I was just suggesting that maybe Ms. Mazzetti should answer that.
Okay.
Sure. So the license holder is a resident of Florida, and I personally live in Washington, and I travel back and forth. STEM Holdings is primarily from Colorado, but they operate in a multiple different states.
Okay, so now you've positioned our community to contend with this and place the responsibility on our city staff to be able to navigate the nuance of this, because we were embroiled in the COVID-19 pandemic. And so now we have to contend with the sequencing of how this originated, so that we can contend within our community with why and how this business is popping up. and the imposition of this. I mean, we've just asked for 500 feet. Y'all could have had a marijuana facility 500 feet away from a childcare facility without any contention, without even the ability for this childcare facility to contend with us. And now we have to manage the nuance of this because of the failure of due diligence from this company that's not even from our community.
I wonder again if we're, that all may be true and reasonable minds may be able to differ on that issue. It seems to me that the facts are pretty established here. There was a mistake made. The city did give some sort of provisional approval. Zoning's fine was the word. And it turned out that was wrong. So we're in a situation here where it seems to me the applicant may have relied on some information. And I don't know that it's our duty to determine who is at fault in doing right due diligence or not right due diligence. So let's. So,
well, I guess the question is
for the company. Because I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, thank you very much. So my point is that if in fact they started the application process and there was no facility nor intent to have one, and now there is, right? That's the question. Like, is this child facility actually up and running? Do they have
from
the
what
licenses?
I read of the facts, it was a licensed child care facility through the entire time.
From the beginning, it just wasn't in use.
It wasn't in use because of the pandemic, but it was a licensed child care facility at that time.
And that is correct. And the license from the state of Michigan for that preschool, that child care, that preschool, which is licensed as a child care facility, remains in effect, even though currently there is not an active preschool, operating out of those 2 classrooms in the church.
So the licensing was there throughout the entire time.
Yes.
It wasn't that they just got the licensing after they started their application.
No, that hypothetical is not the fact.
I very much appreciate that. Thank you for the clarity.
So I guess the one question I have probably is for Mr. Robinson on this one. It seems like a pretty straightforward statute with a bright line 500-foot rule. Does the statute also determine how that's measured? Because I think that if we're thinking about fairness and obviating the mistake, what we're looking at is the shape of the building, what's visible to 3-year-olds, that kind of stuff. How is that measured?
Before I answer your question, I want to also take note of something. Where this business is located or where they're coming from, that is irrelevant to the consideration of the question you have before you. So whether they are a local company or they come from Florida or Colorado, that is irrelevant to the issue, and you should not consider that as a relevant fact to the decision you have to make. As to the question that you raised, Chair Lager, it is set forth in the ordinance. It is basically a straight line. Let me digress for a moment. If this was a liquor establishment, you would go from the front door of the liquor establishment to the center line of the road, down, following that at 90-degree angles till you get to the entrance of the church, in this case, as the protected use. We don't use that method of measuring. We use as the crow flies between the 2 buildings.
So the closest edge of the 2 buildings.
Yes. That's my recollection. I'd have to look up the ordinance, but that's my recollection.
Yeah, let me jump in for a minute. The exact wording is, it's from the property line of the protected use to the closest point of the building that holds the facility license. And the reason for that unique definition of the measurement is because we anticipated these facilities might be in commercial strip centers. And so we didn't want to preclude usage of that entire commercial property for prospective retailers. So in this case, the church property is rather large. but that is where the child care center, the licensed child care center, is located. So, you know, it is from the closest point of the church property, regardless of where the child care license, what portion of the church that applies to. It's from the closest point of that property to the building portion where the marijuana retailer would be, which happens to be the north end of the building.
Mhm.
I have a
If we're-
question.
Oh, go ahead.
I have a question, and I'm not sure if now is the best time. Chair Largo, would this be an appropriate time for me to ask this question or make a statement?
Well, if it's a discussion about the rights here, I think we should stick at this point to trying to determine if we know all the facts we need to know. It's not that question? Okay.
So I have a question. I've volunteered at the First United Methodist several times. First question would be, has anybody met the pastor there and asked them what their thought was?
No.
And anybody can answer that. Okay. And then
I
the
have not.
second thing, okay. The second question I would have is, previously on this call, Mr. Don Hilliard called in, and you may be unaware of this, but I will inform you that the Millwood Community Watch is actually housed out of the Millwood United Methodist Church. Has anybody spoken with him?
I've left him
I
two
have.
messages. Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
And did he respond back? Because I have personal knowledge from a meeting with City Council among the board members of different communities. And Mr. Hilliard had stated openly that he was all for green. And I would say that we could have met with these people because that is a direct concern. But I guess my question moreover is, if this is the actual concern in bringing forth proof or consideration, have we directly involved the people that are really involved?
I've left him two messages and have not heard back from him. I've spoken with 3 out of the 4 other tenants who are in our building. And I have never spoken with the pastor at the church there. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I don't think any of those parties could necessarily stop enforcement of of the ordinance.
But as an inside knowledge, I know what their thoughts are on the matter, just due to my volunteering there. And I think that it would have been very due diligence forward if they were contacted.
And I have something to interject into this again, but it may be irrelevant that, you know, where this company originates from, but it's not irrelevant to democratizing this conversation. And that's why we're in the position that we're in right now, because we didn't do the due diligence, because there is a detachment from this community and the nuance of what our community represents. And so it may be irrelevant as it relates to the ordinance and the legality surrounding it, but this conversation is absolutely necessary. And outlining the succession and the layers of how this arrived and how we got here, I think that is extraordinarily important. And I need to say that because I don't just speak to speak. I wasn't being irrelevant. It's important and I need to know. Because I'm mom and it's not about that. I don't like the position I'm being placed in to make a values assessment about marijuana because I don't have a problem with it. But I definitely think that it's an imposition on this childcare facility that's there.
So just, I'd like to respond to that just for a quick second. So all of these places that are local there have been informed and my information's been given to them to contact me, and I've reached out, and I wholeheartedly believe that if there was feedback, negative or positive, that I hope that they took your invitation as the city of Kalamazoo to come forward and speak either to us or to you or to make their voice known. So a lot of the people that I spoke with said, I don't really care and I don't want to get involved. And that's awesome. You don't have to be involved, but I have reached out to the best of my knowledge and to the best of my ability to reach out and get in touch with the people that are really affected every single day. And I hear you very loud and clear. And I hope that there's some response tonight and some call-ins, and we can get to the bottom of this for sure.
Yeah, as far just as a board chair comment, it's probably impermissible for us to make our decision on anything other than the elements of whether this is properly a grant of a variance. And I think that the origin place of any of the applicants is out of bounds. Corporate citizenship is an issue we all care about quite a bit, and that's just a given for all of us. It won't be the basis of the decision, though. It's not permissible. Are there any other staff comments before we turn to public comments?
Yes, and I was going to ask for the floor just to make a few comments. First of all, I want to say Attorney Sean Myers did a great job of summarizing the facts involved. This has been difficult for myself and for the planning staff. If we look back to, the citizens' desire in Kalamazoo to have, legal marijuana available, back in 2018 was when the ordinances were passed for medical marijuana facilities. And then in this late spring of 2020 is when we got the adult use or recreational marijuana ordinances completed. And we went for a very long time without any review, snafus, difficulties. We had a lot of applicants, apply for, all these different facility types. And it's just hard to see that, from 2018 to the present, we've had no variances that have been granted from any of the separation distances. And now we have this situation, which has come about because of a staff review that was done last year in 2020. And, it's still unclear what happened and why the mere fact there may not have been a sign out there for the daycare, because we do drive-bys when we review for zoning these marijuana facilities, but we also have been checking the online listing from LARA, the state listing of childcare facilities for the appropriate zip codes around the city. So somehow our due diligence did not hit the mark. And I just want to make it clear that, Attorney Myers is here tonight, arguing on behalf of his client, the facts involved in the case. And I want to make it clear that, the time and effort that they've put into it was in part because of the steps that the city had already gone through to issue that provisional certificate. So, that's kind of what's brought us to this point. I believe it was already touched on that this is a multi-tenant building. It was touched on. And for the record, the tenant space that is being used for the retailer is approximately 33% of the building. So as Attorney Myers mentioned, this will not become, the prominent feature on the property at 3928 Portage Street. This is one of 4 tenants in that building. There's been some concern raised about parking. And I know that the property owner has already actively talked with adjacent commercial property owners. In the event he needs to lease parking spaces, he is, gearing up to do that if it's necessary. And that, so all steps are being taken to protect the other tenants that are already in the building and keep them functioning. Let's see. It was also mentioned that the entrance point for the preschool is on the back side of the building. There actually is no driveway coming off of Portage Street going into the church. The driveways are off of the side streets of Lakeway and Paddington. So that then directs the traffic around the back side of the building or the south side of the building, which, puts it further from the subject property we're talking about. Again, it's not 500 feet away, but that 150-foot measurement is simply, front yard to the closest point of the building where the marijuana facility is going in. And, that 150 feet, is, it's essentially just spanning Portage Road. And then you've got, the front yard and then the building and then wherever the classrooms are in the building, if you want to think about it that way. So, and you've got the access point on the back side of the building for the childcare entrance point. Those are just all elements to take into account. It's just, ideally, we want to preserve our 500-foot separation distance. It's there for a reason. It's served us well over the past few years. And, but in this circumstance, it makes it very difficult because we have an applicant that has invested time, money, and has acquired the property, signed leases, and and now we've uncovered this situation that we have to then bring before this board, and then put you in an awkward position as well to then have to hear this case and make a decision on it. So I just wanted to reiterate some of those points made, and I'm open to any questions that the board has. Thank you.
I have a question. The 500-foot distance, is there any reason for it that isn't being addressed by the statements of the location of the classrooms and where the kids will be playing? And these have been addressed, so the idea is they're out of sight, but are there other reasons for the 500-foot distance that have not been addressed?
That's a really good question. I mean, it is an ordinance requirement, and we have a stated means of how that 500 feet is to be measured. So
why is it 500 feet?
Well, for visual separation, I would say, in many cases, 500 feet also limits the traffic flow, having to drive by the marijuana facility. But in this case, these properties are both on the major thoroughfare of Portage Street, and whether it's school buses, metro buses, or mom and dad dropping off their child at preschool, they're all using Portage Street. So there really isn't a significant, separation distance here where that 500 feet, kind of puts it out of sight, out of mind, I guess is the point I'm trying to make.
Can I make a point too, that I think that if I were in your position, the 500 feet also would apply to smoking lounges, consumption places, things like that. I can see that being a very different, a higher need for that. Just because that's a really different marketplace than closed up windows and limited branding and such.
That is true. And in this case, since it is a retailer, the product is acquired on the property, but it can't be used on the property. So it is, and that's why it's classified as a retailer. They are purchasing something and they are getting in their car and they are taking it home, or they are purchasing it however the process works and having home delivery done. But it's, there's nothing that's can be legally, used on the property. So it functions like a pharmacy, for example.
So it's the city's view that the reasons for the 500 feet are mitigated by the circumstances in this case. Is that right? Is that what I'm hearing?
I would say to state that correctly, there is extenuating circumstances that help cushion the blow of this only being 150 feet as measured from the building to the property line. But I can't say that it mitigates the circumstance altogether.
So is the city, when they gave their initial plan, the city didn't check the licenses? They just kind of did a drive-by? Or is that not part of the process?
That is part of the process. So
Okay.
there's a drive-by that's done to drive around the area and check for protected land uses. We also have a map we use, a potential, we call it potential land area map for that various marijuana facility, where we have the protected land uses mapped with buffers around them. But that map is a guide. It's not, it's not to be used as, the rule as far as making decisions. It's just a guide. So then the third thing is, pulling down the list from the state of all the licensed childcares for that zip code. And then that is gone through to see what childcare centers are in that area around that particular subject property.
Gotcha. Okay. And that was the part that was missed by both the applicant and the city. Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Are there any other questions for city staff before we open up the public comments?
Yeah, there is a question for city staff. I don't like being told that my comments are impermissible or irrelevant, specifically when I'm representing like the voice of, first of all, when I say representing, I just mean reflecting the voice of the constituency that wrote in letters in opposition to this. And so it's not impermissible because they have a right to, it's right here. It's here. And this is what we've asked for as it relates to public comment. As it relates to city staff's position on this topic, what is relevant as it relates to our determination about whether or not we should grant this variance? What is relevant, Pete, in this conversation? If the rationale for, spatial politics and, how local zoning regulations incorporate social responsibility, whether or not these businesses originate within Kalamazoo or without from Kalamazoo, what does that look like as it relates to this variance? Because actually all of those things are a part of this conversation. Spatial politics are a part of this conversation. The democratizing of the voices of the people that have reflected that they're in opposition to this is a part of the conversation. And local zoning regulations, again, and social corporate responsibility, those are all very much so a part of this conversation. So as it relates to city staff's perspective about this, what does that look like for you? What is relevant in you guys' mind?
So what's relevant is the fact that you have a 5-lane road between 3928 and 3919 where the church is located. What is relevant is the orientation of the church building and the point of access for preschool children. What is relevant is when those preschool children go outside, where is that play space at? My understanding is it's beside or behind the church. It's not the front yard along Portage Street. So, those are relevant things. Can I say that alleviates the need for the 500 feet? That's a call that the board has to make, but those are all important facts to take into account, and the most relevant fact of all is that, during the zoning review, the city staff, missed that licensed childcare center, and that provisional certificate was issued that then led to the purchase of the property by one entity the lease of the property to another entity, and those are the relevant facts.
So, Mr. Flaw, is that what you were getting at, is the fact that the city staff made a guffaw in this situation after these people had spent all this money trying to develop this business where they were originally told that they could do that under the auspices that there was not a childcare facility or any other impeding factor to pursue their business. And so now that's what we need to be contending with. Is that what you were getting at with what you were saying?
Negative. I was trying to investigate the entire scenario, how the
Got
city
it.
managed to have city managed to get provisional approval, which then costed people who are investing money in our community, potentially a lot of money. And I also wanted to be clear on when when this was actually, I made a mistake when I first started asking the questions. I was under the assumptions when they said not operating, I mistranslated that to not licensed. So I was thinking that when they started the process, there wasn't a licensed facility there, but there was, and there was the entire time. So yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, are there any public comments on this?
Yes, there are several public comments. One moment while I queue those up for you.
Yes, here.
Yes, I'm John Hilliard, President of the Millwood Neighborhood Watch Association. I'm calling to comment on item D3, commenting in opposition to the request for variance by the marijuana facility to be located at 3928 Portage Street in Kalamazoo. The ordinance states a marijuana facility must be 500 feet from a daycare center. This variance would allow this shop to be 150 feet away from a daycare center. To allow the variance is to go against the ordinance, thus setting a dangerous precedence for future variances. Why have the ordinance? The daycare center operated by K-RISA is not functioning now, but is still licensed to do so and will function again in the future. The marijuana facility will be the 8th in Millwood, and the 9th is on its way. In the geographical area covered by Millwood is having the most number of marijuana facilities in Southwest Michigan. With the current number of marijuana facilities in Millwood, Millwood is experiencing a 40% rise in Part 1 crime. City staff is recommending approval of the variance, thus going against its own ordinance. A done deal. Again, we oppose the approval of the variance. It comes down to money and marijuana over kids. Thank you.
Scott Snyder, 1938 Gulfview, Kalamazoo, Michigan, 49001. Absolutely not. There is 22 currently open in the city limits of Kalamazoo. There is close to 70 within Kalamazoo County. There is almost 150 within a half-hour drive to Kalamazoo. There's no way this should be allowed. The state asked for 1,000 feet. The city changed it to 500 feet. This is not the Organic Guys Detroit. This is a major corporation out of Boca Raton, Florida, called STEM Holdings. It's one of the largest distributors. They have multiple licenses in multiple states. You know, it's sorry that the city of Kalamazoo failed to do their due diligence and show them that there was a license. And there has been a license since that educational wing was brought online. There is a new playground going in where it will be visible on the other side of the pine trees. There's no way this should be allowed. That type of business does bring an element of crime. And I know this because I've been involved since 1976 in the marijuana organization. And only recently have I stopped because the city has done whatever they've done to make it impossible to get a micro license. If this goes through, I hope none of you hold any kind of stocks in pot, because there's a good chance you have some of the holding there. That would be a conflict of interest. I urge the board to say no to this. I understand this company also bought other properties within the city of Kalamazoo, which would allow for this sort of thing to happen. Once again, Scott Snyder, 1938 Gulfview, Kalamazoo, Michigan, 49001. Thank you. Scott Snyder, second comment, 1938 Gulfview, Kalamazoo, Michigan, 49001. I didn't quite catch who the two mouthpieces are that are speaking on behalf of the delivery dispensary service. I would like to know who from the church you spoke to. As a trustee there and an employee there, the general congregation says no. I've talked to people at KRESA, which is Kalamazoo Regional Education Center, and they also have said no. That license has been in place since that lane was developed. There has been a child care license there, and it has been run by different people. Now, KRESA has part of it, and they were going to add 2 classrooms this year, but with the pandemic going on, they did not. We were looking to expand even further to more educational opportunities for our children. Like I said, this is not a good idea. The city failed to do their due diligence. I respect the people that bought the property, that are trying to do this, but they were told the wrong thing. They didn't check the licensing. The city of Kalamazoo did not check the licensing, because it's been in place for, 15 years, 20 years? I'm not really sure. It's just not a good fit for this community right here in this area. You have other dispensaries that are right around the corner from them. The city failed to also send out the letters into the community. They went 300-foot mailing, but I know that didn't happen either because I have 2 properties on Lakeway in the Triangle that did not receive this letter that well fit in within 300 feet. I know other properties that did not receive this notice either. I failed, to send it out to everybody because I didn't want to blow this thing up, but the general consensus in this Millwood neighborhood and Millwood, the neighborhood watch and all that is no. When these first started opening, there wasn't armed security guards there. Now you go to them and just about every single one's got 1 or 2 armed security guards. It's a cash business. Cash businesses bring in an element of crime. I wish these guys well. I hope they do good. But how this works is out-of-state people don't get to come in unless they know somebody in state. So whether organic guys was short on cash and now they're getting an infusion, so this license could happen. But, the STEM holdings really, this is nothing to do with Kalamazoo. The company that Organic Guys is in Detroit. The other one's in Boca Raton, Florida. There's no Kalamazoo involvement whatsoever in this. They're not going to just take the shoe store. That shoe store is too small. That would be the smallest dispensary of all of Kalamazoo. They're going to keep them in.
My name is Carly Prinz, address 3928 Portage Street, Kalamazoo, Michigan, 49001. My comment is the following. I own the tanning salon that is in that shopping center. We have been in that center for 8+ years and believe that this kind of shop would be detrimental for this particular shopping center for the following reasons. 1, the parking lot is very small and it is already a struggle for the current tenants and patrons. It cannot handle the amount of traffic that this type of business will bring, which we believe will lead to hurting the other businesses in the center. 2, I disagree with putting in a weed shop that close to a child care center. I can only imagine the parents will have to consider taking their children elsewhere, which will only hurt this center and community. 3, from a business standpoint, we believe that a different location would be more favorable for the dispensary, i.e. more parking, the proper distance from child care centers, and a more commercial versus residential part of town. Thank you for considering our comments.
My name is Ashley Russell, and my address is 3113 Cameron Street. I'm calling in reference to D3 on the agenda. In response to the timeline of establishing the permits of the marijuana retailer and the child care across the street, shouldn't it go based on the date of the child care license when that was issued? Even if there weren't children in the building last year, the building remained licensed during the pandemic into this year. So if the license hasn't expired, which it hasn't, it is still actively licensed previous to the introduction of the marijuana retailer. that should predate the opening of this new retailer. So we oppose the variance based on that. Also, the small businesses that are located in the strip mall that would be neighboring and sharing a parking lot are very concerned about their businesses going under due to the new lack of parking, in which they would no longer have clientele. So thank you for your consideration.
Yes, it's John Hilliard again, from Millwood Neighborhood Watch Association. I want to add a comment that was made during the meeting. There was a comment made by a representative for the marijuana organization that she had tried to get in touch with me twice. I've received no comments or no calls from that individual. I also want to clear up, the Millwood Neighborhood Watch Association is not housed in the Millwood United Methodist Church. Thank you.
Okay, that is the end of public comments for this public hearing.
Thank you.
Can I make a comment as the property owner? Sorry, I didn't know how to send in a comment. No problem.
Yeah, just 1 second. Board members, does that instigate any further discussion that we need to have? Do you have any further questions as a result of that? No. Okay. Yeah, Mr. Fumia.
Thank you. Thank you all for taking the time to be here today and see this entire hearing. I don't want to be repetitive and talk about anything that's already been mentioned. Obviously, there were things that we relied on as the property owner, and the applicant relied on, conditional approval from the city, as we did to purchase the property. But once again, I don't want to get repetitive about that. I do want to touch on a couple of things. One, parking. There are 36 parking spaces in that shopping center. There's a total of four tenants today, with STEM Holdings Organic Guys being the fifth. I don't see an issue with parking, but we are in the works of renting 18 spaces from an adjacent office building if necessary. That's one thing I want to touch on. Two, something was mentioned about crime rate. Is there any statistics to that crime rate being associated with cannabis? Three, the applicant not being local. I'm the property owner. I am a local Michigan resident, born and raised in Michigan. I understand it makes a difference if you're local or not, because you care more about the community. The applicant has stressed that they have teamed up with organizations that benefit the community. And from what I know, they intend on teaming up with more organizations in the Kalamazoo community. But already they have teamed up with an organization that has benefited over 15 veterans in the city of Kalamazoo prior to being operational. If this is not given back to the community, I don't know what it is. I don't know what is. I understand the concerns of a child care center being across the street. I'm a father of 3, so I get it. But if the church that the child care center sits in, if the child care center itself, or the association that runs the child care center, has not opposed this variance, I understand the residents around, but the ordinance doesn't protect the residents, unfortunately. There's no buffer for residential zoning. I just hope the board understands the consequences that we will deal with as a landlord and the applicant for everything that we have already done based off of what we relied on from this city. And I will not throw any blame on the city. So I will not say that the city made a mistake in any way. We just relied on information from the city and an approval from the city. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Could we have a motion on the finding of fact? Beth, I know this is a tough one.
I move that the finding of fact for 3928 Portage Street shall include all information included in the notice of public hearing dated August 25th of 2021. 33 notices of public hearing were sent and 5 responses were received. They are as follows. Ray Foyumia, property owner at 3928 Portage Street, in support. Ron Ware, WPL Security Services at 4225 West Main Street, submitted a letter in support. John Hilliard, Millwood Neighborhood Watch, submitted a letter in opposition. Robert Falk, 1434 Lakeway Avenue, submitted a letter in opposition. And Ashley Russell, Millwood Neighborhood Resident, submitted a letter of opposition. A public hearing was held before the board and public comments were accepted. In addition to the information and documents contained in the agenda packet staff provided for this request, the Zoning Board of Appeals received additional documents or voicemail messages at the hearing and are as follows. John Hilliard called twice, mentioning the granting the variance, setting a dangerous precedent that there are already 8 marijuana facilities in Millwood, and he expressed an interest, a serious concern about the rise in crime. Number 2, Scott Snyder, he called and left a message in opposition. He actually called twice, citing some facts about the marijuana facilities in Kalamazoo and in the state. Was wondering if the applicant had spoken to anybody at the church or at KRESA. Also said that he has a property within the 300-foot radius of the church and that he did not receive a notice. 3, Carly Prince called and left a message opposed. She owns the tanning salon in the shopping strip and have some serious concerns about parking, being close to childcare center, and feels that there's some better locations elsewhere for the business. And Ashley Russell called with some concerns, mentioned that maybe it should go by the childcare license when it was approved, not necessarily whether they are in operation or not. There was some discussion about COVID last year and the childcare center not in operation. The finding of facts shall include those documents just described and also the facts and comments made during the public hearing, which are summarized as follows. Due to the nature of this request, the emotion involved in it, the questions, the comments, some of the questions and comments were hypothetical. At sometimes, Mr. Robinson asked that it be struck from consideration where the applicant is located, where they are from. So with that being said, I'm going to defer to the tape and the professional minutes for this meeting on those types of issues.
On the discussion itself, but
yeah,
can you do a summary of the facts themselves? So
yes.
perfect.
Yeah, I can, and I've done that. but there was so much in between.
You don't have to summarize those. Those are all part of the record, just the facts.
Right, and that's why I reminded everybody of that. All that is going to be skipped.
Good.
Okay. All right. Mr. Sean Myers, the attorney for Organic Guys LLC at 3928 Portage Street. In a nutshell, they are requesting a dimensional variance of 350 feet from required 500 feet separation distance between a marijuana retailer and a licensed child care center. And to my way of thinking, at the end of the day, we go through
those facts.
Yes. There's some issues with the property being able to move forward with their build out. The purchase of the property and the leasing of the property is contingent on that certificate being issued for the use of an adult marijuana facility.
Okay.
Bill,
so, are you done? Oh, you're not done.
I've got more. The building can't be used for this purpose without the variance passing. Project manager, Ms. Marzetti spoke to the branding images and that they're going to be discreet. They're going to have security on site. They are supporting the community and will be sharing some of their revenue towards the Blue Star Dog Service. Staff commented that this is all relatively new, starting in 2018, medical ordinances for marijuana being passed and originating. In 2020, the adult use ordinances were put into effect, and up until this point, no variances have been granted. 30% of this strip mall building, 33% of this strip mall building is dedicated to this business. Some concern about the visual separation and traffic flow with pickup and drop off for the child care center. Ray Fayumia, the property owner, mentioned that there are 36 spaces in that shopping center. There are no issues to his way of thinking with that. They plan to rent. They have the option to rent 18 parking spaces if needed. Ray stated that he's a resident of Michigan and is the property owner. And I close.
Good.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
I'm going to bring this to your attention, and you can decide at this point, given the fact that we are, doing the finding of fact. There were 2 more voicemail messages that came in after
we started the finding of fact. Let's get a second and approval of the finding of fact, and then let's answer the question about those remaining things. Is there a second for the motion on finding of fact?
A second, with the acknowledgement that the taping of the entire meeting will be used as a primary minutes.
Good, thanks. All in favor of approval of the motion of finding of fact signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I think a few, Ms. Doan, I think you had your.
Oh, aye.
Okay, and opposed signify with the same sign. All right, so that motion carries. Board members, is there any objection to listening to further public comment? No,
No objection.
Let's do it.
All right. And let's see, so behind the scenes, or actually I should be able to play these.
Pete, I think one of them came into the D1 mailbox, so it may not be relevant to the, this hearing.
And if it's a repeat of the same person, we don't necessarily want to hear that either.
Well, they are two, they both appear to be, they both are related to this case, and they're individuals that have not called in yet.
Well, let's do it.
Good.
So should I just play them off my email? Would that be?
I can play it. It'll just take me a second or two in between them to go back and forth, but I'll get the first one going right now. Okay.
Okay.
Start computer audio share.
Hi, this is Kenny. I'd like to speak out in opposition to granting the variance for the marijuana facility. I am opposed to it because there's been some comments about the lay of the church. It is parallel to the road. The large part of the parking lot does face the marijuana facility. I heard some comments about what does the pastor think, et cetera. It's kind of irrelevant. The child care facility is there, and the variance, the ordinance is there to protect the children, not necessarily the people who own the business. Also, I do understand that it's regrettable that there was money invested in this facility, as well as the fact that the city had already granted preliminary approval. However, it should be irrelevant to the ordinance that there was a mistake made and money invested. The ordinance is there to protect the children, and the children and the parents have not been consulted. And then also I heard comments that the marijuana facility was only part of, the overall tenants. And yes, while there are several tenants there, it is the largest, most prominent part of the building. I think 33% was mentioned. So it is an incredibly large, proportionate to all the other parts of the facility, and would take up a lot of parking. But all of that still is irrelevant to the fact that the kids would absolutely see it, and their parents haven't been consulted in this, and money invested is irrelevant as it pertains to whether or not the parents would be willing to grant this variance. I could tell you that I would not be. Thank you.
James Russell, 3113 Cameron Street. I'm watching the meeting, and I just wanted to comment that I don't think the people of Millwood should have to pay for the mistakes that a governing body has made as far as zoning goes, and that maybe that should be taken up with the people who have made the mistake. But the people shouldn't have to suffer the consequences of another person's mistake, and the oversight that was done, and the lack of due diligence as far as researching the places in the neighborhood. The child care facility across the street, it's licensed to the state of Michigan, so it should be listed as being in operation, or being licensed at least. So somebody definitely dropped the ball.
Okay, that is the end of public comments.
All right, thank you. Could we have a motion for approval of the variance?
Moment. I make a motion for the approval of the variance for provisions of the zoning ordinance. Sorry, it's been a long night. I make a motion to approve a dimensional variance from chapter 50, 50-4.4E1B to authorize a variance of 350 feet from the required 500-foot separation distance between a marijuana retailer and licensed child care center. There is a Kalamazoo Regional Education Services Agency, K-RESA Preschool on Portage Street, which operates during the calendar school year, which is licensed as a child care center.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, discussion.
I will not be voting in favor of this, as I feel that there is far better means. Kalamazoo is by no means a small neighborhood, and we are quite prolific for retail stores. And with all others being considered with no variances needed, we do have quite an area for growth, and this is not, in my opinion, needed.
Okay. In this case, I think this seems like a difficult case because I think we have sort of been become aware, or maybe I sense that we feel that there's a fairness issue in this case. It appears that this was going along very smoothly. We were heading toward approval of this business and opening of this business. And then it was determined that a mistake had been made. And not for us to say who the mistake was in this hearing necessarily, but that there was reasonable reliance and money was spent by a business doing its best, it seems, to open up here. But the basis upon which I'm going to make my decision tonight is the 7 elements that we must look at in order to determine whether the granting of a dimensional variance is appropriate. And the first element is that there were special circumstances or conditions that are peculiar to the land or structure for which the variance is thought that are not applicable to other land or structures in the same zone district. I think the only special circumstance or peculiarity in this case was that it seems like there was a mistake made, and the sequencing of how that mistake played out. I don't think there's anything difficult about the land or structure here. The statute or ordinance apparently tells us how we are to measure, and that measurement was possible. And I've heard no contention that that measurement was improper. The second condition or element here is that there are special circumstances which are not the result of the action of the applicant or title holder of the land. I believe that there are special circumstances here which were not the applicant's issue. In this case, the next element is that the literal interpretation and enforcement of the terms and provisions of this ordinance would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other land in the same zone district and would cause practical difficulty. I don't think that that element has been met. I don't think that the literal interpretation or enforcement of the terms of this provision would deny this business anything that any other business of this type trying to apply this ordinance would apply to everyone equally. And the next element is that the granting of the variance is the minimum action that would make possible the use of the land or structure that is not contrary to the public interest and that would carry out the spirit of the ordinance. I'll talk a little bit about the spirit of the ordinance when I talk about the 6th element. But in this case, I think that the minimum, that we are being asked to do the minimum, but I think it would violate the spirit of the ordinance. The 5th element is that the granting of the variance will not adversely affect adjacent land in a material way. I don't know that it would or wouldn't, but I think that there's a public
Keegan,
interest.
get my thing off the printer and bring it here.
I think that there's a public interest issue with regard to this 500 feet. It's baked into the ordinance as sort of a separation distance from adult use businesses and childcare centers. So I do think that this could affect land in a material way based upon what I think of as the spirit of that ordinance. The 6th element is that the granting of the variance will be generally consistent with the purpose and intent of this ordinance. I do think that the purpose and intent of this ordinance was to create a bright line, measurable distance between childcare centers and this type of adult use business. So I don't think that this meets that element. Now, all of these elements would have to be met in order for me to approve the granting of this variance. And because at least 3 of these are just so strongly not present in this case, I will be opposed to the granting of the variance. Other discussion? Hearing none, let's have a roll call vote.
Ms. Doan,
No.
Law,
No.
Vanden Hamburg,
Beth, you were on silent.
No.
Harrington,
Remy, we didn't hear you.
you're on
Sorry.
mute.
I'm sorry, I said no.
Turpinning,
No.
Chair Lager.
No. The variance is not granted. Thank you. And with
Thank you
that,
for your consideration.
Yep, thank you for your presentation. With that, we have no other business tonight and we are adjourned.